for this panel, which is focusing on technology. Clearly, the House is divided. The ayes and the nays in favor of the technology as a currency, and at the same time, it also appears that there is a whole lot of the information that needs to be exchanged. There's quite a bit of confusion whether to deal this as a script or as a currency or as a utility or as a commodity. But yeah, as far as the technology remains, this is blockchain, and it plays a predominant role in the functioning of cryptos. It has its own advantages, which probably is increased transparency of transactions because of the decentralized nature. The other side of the coin is that as safe as it may appear, blockchains are only as secure as the weakest link. For example, if as a layman, if somebody really wanted to access the data shared within an exclusive blockchain, the only thing which is required is to have access to one of the nodes in it. However, the widespread use of blockchain is yet to take roots, primarily because of the complexities associated with it. Apart from banking and cryptocurrencies, blockchain has the potential to be implemented in various other sectors as well. Challenges remain with the widespread adoption that include high costs, that includes transparency, maybe a lack of clear regulation, privacy and security of data shared on a distributed ledger. So, this is going to be the widespread spectrum of the debate, and we have our esteemed panelists as Mr. Sharad Sharma, who is co-founder of iSpert Foundation, Mr. Ravinder Singh, who is partner Kalari Capital and a crypto economist, Dr. Ram Rastogi, who is a digital payments strategist, was erstwhile with the National NPCI Payments Corporation of India. Dr. Aruna Sharma, who is Distinguished Fellow at Scotch Development Foundation, a development economist and former Secretary Government of India, and Dr. Rahul Dey, who is Professor Information Systems and Dean Programs, IIM Bangalore. Let me first of all invite Ravinder, who is a technologist with several hundred global recognition and many inventions. His body of work is in the area of robotics, blockchain, AI, intelligent networks, industrial cloud, adaptive manufacturing, and cognitive computing. And he holds a number of patents to his credit. My question to you is, when we are looking at the cryptos and the blockchains, what are the bottlenecks in the widespread adoption of this technology? Why is there so much of noise around it if we say that this is a secure technology? So we open the discussion. We'll have about 3 to 5 minutes for each panelist for the initial comments, and then we get into a discussion. So with this, Ravinder, over to you.
This is like putting me on spot, Gulsharan. Look, I'm just an engineer. I still write code. I've written tons of code, blockchain code. I basically call blockchain as a part of distributed computing as an engineer. So call me a purist from that particular perspective. Look, the answer is in your question, to be very, very precise and specific. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise, and I somehow keep myself away from politics of currency. Currency is a very, very small use case of distributed computing, and blockchain is a subset of distributed computing. But let me justify, 3 minutes. I will not take 5 minutes, Gulsharan, in terms of what I think and what my body of work for last 14 years have taught me, and some conclusion. I'll keep it relatively high level, unless until anyone wants to be very, very specific in terms of the tech part. Okay, and let me start with the last time when we met, Gulsharan, and this was in Constitution Club of India, and you asked me to say something, and this was a Swadesh Manch, and you basically asked me, Ravi, which are the key tech where India should lead, will lead or not lead. Look, I'm not a I'm not a policymaker, so I can't decide that. But one of the technologies which I mentioned, Gursharan, very, very passionately was blockchain. And here is, and I'm going to repeat some part of my hypothesis, which has become realistic now. So look, long back, Constitution Club of India, and I said that, look, time has come for India to lead at least in few technologies and create new economies. And I mentioned 5 economies, Gursharan, okay? And I was kind of disappointed that still we read Western papers, we study Western models, which are all good, but we should do a cut and paste of that, because they are not applicable anymore. And that's where the chaos is. So first answer is that, India has become a remarkable democracy, and the federated system is something which cannot be replicated. So no cut and paste model will happen over here. And the more we try to do that, the more noise will be created. And blockchain and linkage of blockchain to all kind of, right from exchanges to distributed finance and anything in between, including currency, will create a confusion. And that confusion exists because we are again trying to do something which is remarkably wrong in terms of replicating model which is not suitable for India. And India should actually lead in terms of creating a federated model of blockchain, and I'll talk about that. I also there are out of 5 economies which I mentioned, Gursharan, 2 of those economies have become very, very large and disrupting all aspect of any economic startup in a global. One is creator and other is gig economy. And strangely, even today, both in creator and gig economy, India is not the leading one. Where if you actually look at if you look the demographic part of it and our growth part of it, or even the GDP contribution part of it, we should be the leading light in the world from a creator and gig economy out of the 5 economies which we have mentioned. So a little bit disappointment to start with, but I'll bring a lot of exuberance in terms of economic paradigms which we can lead. So first, so let me be a little bit prescriptive, because I teach also. So I have a little bit of right to be prescriptive. I think we should stop waiting for someone to show us the way, because we are the democracy of the world, and our republic and federated structure is a shining model light to call to decide what should be global blockchain economy. And crypto is just a small ignite, and a currency just happens to be a spark. So debate and policy should focus only on 2 aspects of the overarching. One is citizen rights, another is trade. Okay, and in both citizen rights and trade, only on 2 aspects. One is efficiency and transparency. So if we keep our focus on these 2 elements, and within these 2 elements, only 2 factors, which is efficiency and transparency, our policy making will become far more easier, and distributed computing / blockchain in relevance to world will make far more sense, and far more. As I said, I'm not going to take more than 3 minutes. If you have questions on what is the difference between a traditional blockchain, private chain, and why India should not adopt these kind of models, copy Singapore or reject China or accept capitalism of US, I can talk about that. But I will say one thing, and which is common sense, and sometimes that is the most important thing, Gursharan. When customer, companies, and regulators, all 3 are unhappy, okay, then disruption has to happen. Okay, so while we can criticize traditional finance or traditional economic policy because 2 or 3 of them are unhappy, even in crypto, which is so nascent over here, okay, one of them is very, very unhappy, so disruption is bound to happen. So this model is not replicable. So I think we should be very conscious of this particular fact, because common sense prevails, and it creates disruption. Okay, maybe time has come, Gursharan, for you and Samir and Scotch to basically participate more actively and put some sense where you connect sanity of technology with the common sense of policy making to create something which makes sense in an Indian context of democracy and federated blockchain, and create a new model for the world.
Well, that's quite a wonderful start. So it gives us even more food for thought. So we'll come back to you. Thank you so much. I move on to invite Arunaji, as I already introduced her as Distinguished Fellow, Scotch Foundation and Development Economist, and former Secretary Government of India. She has had her stint both at the state and the center, wherein she visualized, worked, and implemented several successful programs, including Samagra. So she is a people's person, and drafted also the national steel policy that gave preference to the local manufacturing, enabling complete revival of the sector. And she has been observing this particular debate on cryptos for a very long time. So I would like to pose a very specific question to you, in addition to whatever you may like to say, that the current rules and regulations, deal with the use of blockchain technology in different industries. What are the shortcomings, if any, that do you see?
Very right, Gurcharan. Thank you so much, and a good beginning by Mr. Ravinder Singh. See, let me first of all, because I overheard some of the deliberations in the first session, and what Scott should do is clearly make it a silo. CBDC is a digital currency. Currency means which is backed by the Central Bank of India, means RBI in case of India, and has a gold block with it. And crypto is crypto. I had discussions with the exchanges and everything, and you must have observed over last fortnight or so, everybody is now using the word crypto and not cryptocurrency. And same debate we had with the policymakers and tried to make them understand the moment we sort of divide the two, half of the confusion disappears. Then you look at crypto as an asset, you list crypto as an asset, therefore the SEBI rules will follow, therefore income tax rules will follow, and everything will follow. So this distinction has to be set absolutely right in understanding, which I found lot of overlap in the previous session in which I overheard and while you were having it. Then to coming to your question, the blockchain technology, if you look at it, the apprehensions with crypto is now if they have KYC and AML, half your problem is solved as a regulator. And that is where the regulator should step in at all. And the blockchain, if the money is galloping in the blockchain, if you look at it, it is because not of the sale. It is because more and more people participating and using blockchain. It's only 17% who have removed the money from the crypto. Like, these figures are something very surprising, and yet you see this rise, which will stabilize very soon, and you will not have this kind of a the peaks and the troughs in the graph so often. Now, if you look at the do's and don'ts of the technology, and you have many of the technical friends also around, blockchain is a brilliant technology which will be coming not only in the financial sector, into your database sector also. And if you look at the regulations, the blockchain has been left to itself. It is evolving, it is moving on its own, and therefore the present IT Act is not a hindrance to the blockchain. It is evolving it to go, it will evolving a lot of innovation. And the value for the crypto is because of innovation. Like if you are putting your 100 rupees in a crypto and it becomes 150, it is because of innovation, not because of the buying and selling which happens in your security market. This understanding has to come out very, very clearly, and therefore allow the mechanism for lots of innovation on this blockchain technology, where the huge databases that we are having, and the biggest beauty of this is that nobody can tinker with this database. You cannot alter the database. Once it is done, it is like a permanent etch on the rock, and you can access that data very easily. It is not difficult. It is said to be a disadvantage by a regulator, but advantage from the technology, it is decentralized, completely decentralized. And which is the beauty of this blockchain technology, because it enables now more and more participation, ease of participation, more people using it, more people innovating upon it, more people moving ahead with it. So at this moment of time, our IT Act is more than enough to allow this innovation. Unless until we start tinkering on it and become holier than thou and do a flip flop like we have been doing in many of the e-commerce policies or your other policies, which is creating lot of problems and needed to be resolved, needed to be withdrawn by some of the ministries. So all these things we should avoid, and definitely interministerial talk is important. The parliamentary committee is being briefed by the stakeholders on all these points of issues. And again, I'll repeat, your Scott should come out again very clearly in your paper. Digital currency is different, CBDC is different. This is crypto. It is not cryptocurrency, it is an asset where you invest. So if I invest in security, my security may double the money, my security may doom me. Exactly the same thing one should expect when you are putting money in crypto, not expecting anything more than it. Similar protections, what you give to your securities, same protections will follow here. So in the sense, it doesn't require any new law at all. So I think enough of law we had. We should allow technology to evolve. And I totally agree. And I will stop here with Mr. Ravinder saying we have to evolve our own model, not copy paste. Not as like when the ban was there, Supreme Court said, quoting the Constitution, you should be proportionate to the amount of fear that you envisage. Right. And that's why they stopped the ban on crypto. Exactly the same thing we have to do. Our regulating the technology part, we should be proportionate to the fear that we have, allow it to evolve. I think Indians have great brains and we will have our own IPRs and better evolving system. I think I'll stop at this point.
Well, thank you so much. We reserve our questions, and I know that you have to leave by maybe 5 past 12. So we'll put our questions together after I invite Dr. Ram Rastogi, who is a digital payment strategist, a career banker with over 3 decades in hand, and having worked on digital payments, e-commerce. He was the one who made the who played a primary role in the development of mobile-based real-time payment system at NPCI, and was the part of the core team that designed various payment systems, including the RuPay. Coming from the background, we've been hearing a whole lot of things. So, Ram, if I have to ask you that. Definitely for the payments industry, we are looking at the cryptos, as Arunaji said, that the currencies are now not being talked about. We're only talking of crypto. That means the focus is now shifting to technology. So which all industries the blockchain can be major disruptor for? Ram.
Hi. Thank you, Gurcharan, and thank you, Samir, for allowing me to participate in such a thoughtful discussions. The first session was really very alarming and talked about Gulshan Rai and Dr. Patnaik and others. Technology is always an enabler. Technology, you need to master that technology. So DLT or the blockchain, what you're talking about, the technology is one of the best available in the country, world, and every sphere is being adopted, be it banking and be it in cross-border payments, and the banking itself, will be surprised to know that India, we have created a bank chain, and bank chain will, all the bank customer will be talking to each other, and that is going to be very safe, secure, economical. And the best part is that it's transparent, and you cannot with either, that Aruna Madam has said. But in this case, when the currency was created on the blockchain, it was not created for speculation. It was created for cross-border payments and remittances. They wanted to reduce the hegemony of dollar, which is US monetary hegemony is happening, that whenever you do a cross-border transaction, it has to be routed through dollars. Any currency conversion increases the cost by 4%. And that was one of the reasons why this was developed. But speculation was never thought on these lines. Speculation happened when there was a short of demand and supply. So only a limited number of Bitcoins were issued, and it was sold and bought every time. Now, what happened after that, that this crypto or whatever the currency you name it is being used for terrorist funding and other areas where, you have no control, because the basic genesis of the cryptocurrency is that it is anonymous. That means nobody knows where it's going, and it is away from the regulation. These 2 points, which RBI is harping, I think we should know as a, not only the policymaker, as a member of parliament, that the genesis of the entire currency crypto is that they don't like to be regulated, and they want that it should be announced. Nobody should know why cash is popular in the country, because the transaction cannot be seen by somebody else. You go, pay the cash and go away. But this third thing is very important, that if at all you are taking it as an asset and creating an exchange, and then tomorrow who's going to take care of the settlement risk? The settlement risk converted in the monetary stability. What about the currency exchange fluctuation? How we are going to take it? How the domestic savings are being converted in the assets, investment savings. The domestic saving is always being popularized by the country to use it for the production, for the infrastructure development. You'll be surprised to know, after when the Supreme Court lifted the ban, 22 crore people have invested about $6.6 billion. And out of that, 70% is coming from the tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4 cities like Imphal, Mohali, Ranchi. 75% people have invested less than 3,000 rupees. Tomorrow, if the Bitcoin goes down from $70,000 to $2 or $3 or $1,000, and there's a chaos, who's going to take the responsibility? These are the questions we need to really understand before we decide that it is to be regulated. Yes, it has to be tamed. It is a bull in the China shop. $6 billion in India. And this data which I am quoting, this is quoting from crypto exchanges. What is happening? The money gone outside under LRS, $250,000 you can remit and you can invest in crypto. Now the crypto exchanges in US is being connected to crypto exchanges in India. How the money, how the crypto transactions are moving from Indian exchange to other. Do you have any knowledge? No. Has been how we are going to do that. So to my opinion, we need to have more and more deeper discussions like what we have today, and understand that if we are going to regulate the crypto, do we have capability of regulating? Regulation is one part, supervision another part. If you're regulating, how we are going to supervise and how we are going to make sure that transactions are happening. You'll be surprised to know in the last 6 months, about $1.5 billion is being used by the Bombay people itself in buying and selling NFT. Now, Subi Madam has rightly pointed out in previous discussion that it is now the time is coming in the metaverse. Metaverse is worse than what we have today. This is all cryptocurrency. This is being paid and bought in crypto. I create my own area and say this is $1 billion and I sell it for $1 billion. So what I'm just trying to say that let's understand that this is a nuance which is going to happen. There's one of the speculation from the BIS. BIS is an umbrella body for the central banks across all globe. They are worried about. They said, whatever you say, by 2030, 25% of the currency will be in the form of cryptocurrency. Imagine a scenario, this cryptocurrency doesn't have an intrinsic value. A country like India, 6 lakh crores, $6.6 billion, if it goes zero, how we are going to say? Now, Dipali Madam was saying that the Ponzi schemes, it was not regulated. And when something happened, RBI was asked that how you allowed to make it happen. And these are the areas I think we should have, this course should have more and more deeper discussions on this and find out that, yes, everybody wants to say that it is going to be regulated. How we are going to regulate it, what technology is there, how we are going to convert that anonymous in going up, knowing everywhere, how we are going to tax the entire thing, because taxation is not there at all. If you're making it exchange, you have to put GST there. Then there has to be income tax payment. Are they willing to pay because they want to an outsider? You don't know who's the people who are buying and selling this. So this is my humble submission here.
Thank you. Arunaji, let me ask you a question here. What we've been able to understand is that the currency, since happens to be a sovereign function, that means that it has to be regulated. But when we are talking of crypto, it is not taken as a currency, it's taken as a technology, taken as a blockchain. And you say that IT Act takes care of it. So where are we? I mean, it creates even further confusion. What are we talking? Are we trying to justify the technology to be taken as a currency, which is a sovereign function, and that needs to be regulated?
See, let me be very, very clear again. In India, this straight line has been drawn between the two. RBI will issue digital currency, which will take care of the cross-border payments, which will take care of making Indian rupee stronger in coming years, which will move ahead. Crypto will never be given in India the status of currency as has been given in El Salvador. That is the only country which has given them a status of a currency. The rest of the countries, China has completely banned crypto, but that is one extreme, and other extreme is El Salvador, where they have declared it as a currency. Now, here in India, there is going to be a complete watertight line between the digital currency, the CBDC given by the RBI, where your 100 rupees will remain 100 rupees. It will not become 110 or 100 or just remain 50. And crypto will be as an asset, like any other asset in the securities market, where you do the exchanges, where you make money, you lose money, and your protection is zero. Not even 5 lakhs what you have in a fixed deposit or a bank account. Even that is not going to happen. So the regulator will be defining it something on these lines. But technology of crypto will be the major one, where it will be declared an asset. The moment I say it asset, automatically the income tax as well as GST, everything gets attached to it, it will follow. So that is a scenario which is evolving, which is getting debated in the parliamentary committee, which is getting debated with the policymaker and in the finance department. But this division is now being made very, very clear that this is not a currency, it will be treated as an asset. And today's headlines also make it very, very clear that this has happened. And CBDC will be there, which will take care of tokens, which will take care of the international exchanges, which in future will increase the value of the INR as we move ahead, and sort of make it distinct from the dollar dependency. So these are two different windows entirely. And of course, the digital currency will also be on a blockchain, right? So they will adopt the same technology there, but as a currency, here, not a currency. That's the difference. Right?
Thank you. So let me move over to invite Mr. Sharad Sharma, who is co-founder of iSpert Foundation. Is one of the active technology angel investors and a passionate evangelist of the software product ecosystem. In fact, there's a whole lot of new dimensions of crypto that have come up, as Arunaji also mentioned. So our biggest challenge is that we need to increase our understanding of this technology. How can we do that?
Yeah, so as Arunaji said, there are two facets to this, crypto as an asset, crypto as a technology. Let's talk about both. Crypto as an asset obviously needs regulation. In India, you have lots of investment scams, so you need regulation. Crypto obviously needs a new kind of regulation, which has to be smart regulation. I think India has the capacity to do this. A little bit of was alluded by both Ravinder and Ram and Arunaji. So we can get into those details later. Then it comes to this issue of technology. Now, what makes this debate somewhat interesting is there are two camps. There are one set of people say technology ought not to be regulated, and second say it ought to be regulated. So look, we are all doing this virtually because there is a situation where gainer function research, which was banned by President Obama, was perhaps bypassed. That ban was bypassed by government agencies, and Fauci himself is being grilled for having done that, which perhaps led to an escape of this new-fangled virus, which has caused untold misery in the last 2 years, right? So we know technology is regulated. Nuclear technology is regulated. AI/ML will have to be regulated because it has issues, and therefore crypto as a technology also has to be regulated. What makes crypto as a technology different from other technologies is that it claims to undermine the nation state. That is the difference. When a rogue virus is coming, rogue virus is not coming to dismantle the nation state. So, maximalist, want to replace the nation state and therefore the central bank, with an alternative system. And that is the issue, which is why you have so much of, emotion evolved in this. Now, let us say we don't want to dismantle the Indian state. Then the question that we have to ask ourselves is, what part of this technology is relevant to India? Now, crypto offers 3 promises. First promise is friction-free payment. Many countries are looking at crypto or stable coins and even CBDC because it gives them friction-free payment. In India, that is not very appealing because we already have friction-free payment, right? And so that's that UPI, which is the 3rd layer of India stack, is already there. So that's not so attractive as a proposition. The second thing that crypto offers is it creates, the right balance between information. It reduces information asymmetry, and therefore that's a fact, and that's where ledgers come in. And India has a system which has been launched on 2nd September for financial data called the Account Aggregator, for health called the Personal Health Records. And it is part of the Personal Data Protection Bill. And the largest system is called DEPA, Data Empowerment and Protection Architecture, which has interest from many other countries. So do we really, really need crypto to bring that about? No, not really. It's not clear that is the case. So the third thing that crypto promises is trust. And trust, you can say, it offers provenance. It offers track and trace. I can find out a Himachal apple really started from Himachal apple or got here, or green copper is truly green copper because it was mined the right way and then processed the right way. And therefore I can, pay 10% more for green copper contract than I would pay for something else. So provenance is something that crypto definitely offers. And it offers promise, a future promise. It says, because of a smart contract, I am assured of a payment that, let's say, for example, a payment that will be made sometime in the future. So provenance and promise, therefore, engender trust. India is a low trust society. Can we think of this as a basis for making the same leapfrog that we've done in other areas to go very rapidly, from low financial inclusion to high financial inclusion in similar fashion, from low trust to high trust. And that is the area where it has a role to play. So first and foremost, I think if you take the asset part of it, and frankly, I disagree a little bit with Aruna ji, where she said asset pricing is very rational. We know crypto pricing is completely irrational. It's a fully speculative asset today, which is why you have had, price corrections of 90%, several times in its history. So if you take the asset part again and look at technology, then we can look at it through the lens of what our nation needs and then decide whether it is needed or not. Now, the question that comes up is, to create digital trust, is crypto the only option? Or are there other options? I could make an argument that e-way bill, e-invoicing, and e-mandates of UPI create provenance and create future promise, right? And so, but they are inferior systems. They're not national in nature. Could we get them to go national in nature? I think the answer to that is yes. And this is where I will finish. And so I think the once you start placing it like this, then it gives you a framework to analyze how important it is for you to play off the disadvantages that you may see. And my favorite example is to do with digital music. Some 20 or so years ago, music was all physical. You got it in cassettes or you got it in CDs everywhere else in the world. And then there was an argument that music should go digital, and it did initially as Napster. But by the time Napster reached 22.4 million people, using it, a consensus developed in society saying that the Napster way of going digital music bypasses copyright. And the societal, across countries, decision was that we cannot have the Napster form of digital music at the cost of the copyright consensus that has been there for so long. So despite the fact that marketplace was not fighting for copyright, a systematic effort came in and boom, Napster went away. And what replaced it is two other forms of digital music, which you can say are, you can buy your music, iTunes, or you can rent your music, let's say Spotify, and they don't contravene the global consensus that has happened. So we made the move from physical music to digital music without compromising the consensus. So the question that we have to ask is, can we make the move from physical trust to digital trust without compromising two things or several things that are problematic about crypto? One is that it does have AML, terrorist financing is a problem. It does contravene tax, and it's very hard to tax it the way it is set up right now. And the third is it undermines the central bank. And so the question that we have to ask is, will we have digital trust in the future? The answer is yes. Would India be one of the first movers in the world, at least in the developing world, to create digital trust? I think the answer to that would be yes. And but would that be based on crypto? I think small parts of it will be based on crypto. A lot of it will not be based on crypto. So I'll stop here, and I'll be happy to answer questions if they come up.
Thank you so much. We have one more panelist speaking on this before we get into the discussion. I now invite Dr. Rahul Dev, who is professor of Information Systems and Dean Programs at IIM Bangalore. His primary research interests are in AI ethics, e-governance systems, open secure, telemedicine, ICT for development, artificial intelligence, so on and so forth. One part of the debate, which easy to handle, is that whatever is good for the people will adopt. We have seen that despite the best efforts from naysayers, cryptos have only grown. There are almost 40, 45 currencies which are already being traded on different crypto exchanges on India. And the amount of investment is only growing by leaps and bounds. The other side is, which is what we have, that it's questionable. There are risks attached with that. So, Dr. Dey, so what are the bottlenecks in the widespread adoption of this technology, and how is it that the skepticism that people have can be removed? Because there are three sides of it. Whether it is an asset class, it's a commodity, it's a currency. It looks like there is a whole lot of confusion. So how do we come out of that?
Okay, thank you, Gulsharan. Thank you for inviting me. Also, I think you posed a very tough question for me, and I don't know if I can answer. Given the I've heard both panels, some excellent comments. Let me just say a few things. I will begin with my own research on some of these things. One of them is the phrase wasn't mentioned. I'll just mention it. Everybody knows it. It's the digital divide. We still have a digital divide in our country. As we've seen in the pandemic, many people who are on the wrong side of the divide have suffered much worse than others. Education, healthcare, just basic access was denied to them. And as we move towards this digital possible utopia or not, a digital world we are increasing, we have to worry about those who do not have access even to smartphones. We have done the study even with basic payment technologies like UPI and Paytm. People are not able to access them through their feature phones, let alone getting into cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and things. So that's one part of it. We have to keep that in mind as we go forward. There will be a certain section of people who will benefit from the conveniences that these technologies provide, and there'll be others who will not benefit. Now, that's one of the bottlenecks. The other interesting debate which people have commented on, so I won't be able to add much to that. I will only say that I think with blockchain, we are still in early stages. This is an open source technology which came out possibly a decade ago. It is still, people are calling it a foundational technology. We are just seeing the beginning. There's a huge amount that can be done. And for example, I mean, Sharad mentioned this, Ravinder mentioned this also, that there are many applications of this which are waiting to be developed. I will also say, because it's open source, the underlying technology will change. It is going to evolve and change. So we're going to see a huge amount of development in this. How it will pan out, we don't know. One thing I would insist as an academic, I feel, and I do work in this, one shouldn't see technologies as tools, like a hammer you pick up and go hammer and nail. We have to see technologies as changing us also. We are also shaped by these technologies, the way we work, the way we think. And an example I always give in class is, as your cars get smarter and smarter, in Bangalore, you're supposed to wear a seatbelt. And if a policeman catches you, you're fined not wearing a seatbelt. Soon your car will tell the policeman that you're not wearing a seatbelt because it has a sensor which knows that. Police don't have to look into your car, the car will inform. And that is the same situation. Just it's not I'm not saying this in a negative sense, but the technology will shape our behavior. And as we get into these kinds of sophisticated cryptocurrencies, they will be affecting the way we function and work. And we have to be cognizant of that. This doesn't require regulatory oversight, but we have to be aware of this. Now, there is a point that I felt like saying in many situations. These technologies are subject to network effects very strongly. And network effects means today everybody loves Bitcoin, and so its price has gone up. There are, every time I look, there are a few thousand more digital currencies which have no value. Anybody can start it because it's an open source technology. I can also start it and start another coin, and some people may like it, some people may not. So most likely many of them will disappear. It is guaranteed. They cannot survive. Network effects tell us that it's usually a winner take all market. So in a sense, for our regulatory purposes, we have to worry about one or two of them. Now, another issue, and I'll probably, you asked me about bottlenecks and how do we inform. The information part of it is very important. I'm fully with Scotch on this. I'm myself involved in writing and disseminating as much as we can. Many of us don't understand, even academics who spend our lives doing this. We are just struggling to keep up with this pace of what is going on. I do read AI, ML, I read relentlessly. But even recently, when you asked me to be on this panel, and my first reaction was, wait, I don't know what's going on in this field. But we have to, and I fully agree with you, we have to inform ourselves and we have to inform others. So I'll pause here. Thank you.
Thank you. Ravinder, would you like to respond to what Professor Dey said?
Yeah, we all have to be, accustomed to this change which is happening rapidly. But let me make an attempt to make this a very focused, little bit of a depth to the discussion. Because Sharad had been very articulate in defining the framework, whether I agree or not. But there is a framework over there, what he has mentioned. Look, when you I have always mentioned that sometimes, people who create, people who write code, if they can learn, economics, then economists should also make an attempt to learn, what I call as JavaScript, how to create a wallet in JavaScript, or how to basically create two blockchain systems using oracles. And this is not the Oracle as a company. This is something which is known as. But that's that was just a humor. Look, there are 6 things, and I'm just providing some depth. And stop me, Gurcharan, if it is too deep. Okay, there are 6 elements for any blockchain platform, irrespective of whether you do a currency or you call them assets or something like that. Principal, participants, ownership, consensus mechanism, speed, and regulations. Okay. And predominantly, there are 2 kinds of, blockchains which are emerging, which is private and public. Okay, and if you take all these 6 elements, and if you look from the focus of these elements, if you look at principle, most of these private and public, and that's why I'm saying they are not suitable, directly for India. India has a huge advantage, which Sharad hinted. To create something which is known as a federated, just because of our democracy and the structure of this particular democracy, and we have done a leapfrog in terms of financial inclusion. Irrespective, I totally agree with Dr. Rahul in a sense of digital divide still exists. But if you look at proof of work, proof of stake, when all nodes are equal, doesn't works in a real world, frankly. Okay, doesn't works in a real world, irrespective of a vibrant democracy we are. Okay, so we have this huge opportunity to create new principle where proof of vote has got some governance to it, and that governance can be a federated governance through a central and state mechanism. I think we have that thing. I think that's a huge opportunity. Number 1. Number 2 is a participants, permission by a single authority. Okay, whether it is private or public permission, this doesn't against work in a normal governance, regulated democracy, or a regulated world which believes in democracy. Okay, there has to be a structure, there has to be a hierarchical structure, whether we like it or not. Okay, again, India has this great opportunity. Okay. The third one is ownership. Now, that is something which is open to interpretation, whether it can be done by an industry, whether it can be done by institutions. I'm not going to touch it. I don't understand that subject that well, but it is open for all, country to country, state to state, or something like that, whether it should be done at a central level or a state level. Consensus mechanism, okay, where a lot of debate has already happened, so I'm not going to comment upon it. But remember, what Dr. Rahul mentioned. Look, people who are on the other side of digital divide, they are also citizens of India, and they have rights too, and their consensus should matter. And that is one difference between current platforms and what blockchain nodes provide them. It gives each and everyone, minority, not minority, everyone, irrespective of their stature, okay, a right of consensus. And that's where I'm very passionate about. And hence I differ a little bit from, Dr. Ram over here, that here technology is not an enabler. Here it is actually a driver. And this is a change. Whether we accept it as a driver or not, that's a separate thing. Now, there are 2 things which are missing and which are under a lot of question. One is a highly tech part, which is a speed, okay? Almost right from Ethereum to any other blockchain, okay, they are getting slower and slower, and resource intensity is becoming unbearable for this, okay, which results in corruption. When I say corruption, a lot of hacks, a lot of fails. There is something which is known in computer science known as, or a computing, which is known as race conditions, where 2 nodes don't know what a decision has to be taken because resource allocation, compute allocation. And good thing is that the cost of compute is going down. So this will be solved, but it is still an unsolved problem, and we have to solve it so that a country as large as India should be able to create a foolproof. And that is the real reason why it is not foolproof. You can actually, great example, of a policeman and a car example. You can actually automate by creating alerts instead of, creating, these huge record-keeping systems, to manage and, to manage the corrective nature or the regulatory part of it. By the way, that's the easiest part over here. And the third one is regulations. Look, I totally agree. No rules, consensus are predefined in a private and public chain. This is not acceptable. in a federated one, and hopefully, Gursharan, you will lead it, or Samir should lead it, some sort of consortium, state level, government level, maybe third party, should define strictly for every block of an organization, which, by the way, exists in the broad architecture of blockchain. So if you look at these 6 elements, then some sanity prevails. And hopefully, people who are creating policy or who are deciding, they are aware of what they are trying to do, rather than, cut and paste or based upon, reading material which is publicly available on WhatsApp or on internet. So that's what I will say, Gurshan.
Great. So Ram, moving over to you, he has made a couple of points to what you talked about. In addition to that, when we say that it needs to be regulated, but we are also questioning the capability of the regulator at the same time. So it's becoming a dichotomous situation. Ram. You are muted. Please unmute yourself.
I fully agree with you that yes, and that's why I suggested more and more deeper discussions on that. And we should also involve that exchange people who are running the exchanges or platform, and let's find out and give them the thought that these are our problems, how we are going to sort it out in a country like India. We all love it, blockchain and the various use cases which Ravindra has already pointed out. This technology can do whatever we want, but at the end of the day, whether this technology is good for this country, it has to be decided by people by and large, both the side. And the country like India, where 29% people are not even digitally literate. I told you, I'll give you the numbers that if people, 70% of the users are coming from the remote areas, and there's another data says they have invested 3,000 rupees kind of money in crypto. Are they really knowing what they're doing? 2 years ago, when somebody lost 100 crore in Bombay in crypto, nobody bothered. But if these people in Imphal or Ranchi or places, if they're losing money, then how we are going to do that? So let's have a evolved discussion and again and bring the people both sides. And then see that, yes, which technology is required. Particularly discussion point is that whether the crypto is being regulated. If this is regulated, then how we are going to regulate it? In that case, the guys who are going to be regulated, they should be also given a chance. So we can have another discussion on that point of time. This is my submission.
See, having a regulation is good. Because but it always has been the case that in those areas where we thought of regulation first before the technology happened, the experiences have been different. But in this case, it so appears that it has already leapfrogged, and also at the same time there remains a whole lot of ambiguity. There is not enough information available. So Sharad, being in a civil society space, and also having worked in the field, several questions that come up, which is what you would have handled from the front. So whether it is to do with the regulation, whether it is to do with the technology, which is what you said, that technology ought not to be regulated, but crypto as a technology has to be regulated. And Arunaji said that already the IT Act provides for it, while RBI says that I don't know whether it is my baby or it is going to be SEBI's, or whether it's going to be commodity or some other asset class. So what is the way out of this confusion? How do we educate? How do we take this message to people?
I'll build on what Professor Rahul they said, is that, there is a new form of regulation that is happening, which is techno-legal in nature, and I'll give you a very simple example of this, that if you were only going to catch 10% of the people who skip a red light, then your fines should be very high, because you have to have a way to prove to society that, there's a small chance of you being caught, but when you're caught, it's going to cost you a lot. Now in UK, where traffic cameras are ubiquitous, and the chance of you skipping the light, chance of you being caught is above 80%, then the fines have to be very small, right? So the fact is, there is a techno-legal approach that is needed to enforce or drive good behavior. In the past in India, good behavior came from the point of view of rules and laws, and therefore you could say the courts ensured good behavior. Now code can ensure good behavior too. So it's a combination of code and court acting together, which makes it smart regulation. India has an opportunity to do that. We are doing that in data with DEPA and PDP bill, but we also have an opportunity to do this now in this crypto assets, digital asset side. And is there an analog of this anywhere in the world? There isn't an analog of this anywhere in the world. So we have to have confidence in our own ability to be able to make that happen. Now, why is it possible for India to take the lead to make that happen? And I'm going to spend a few minutes taking a very, very simple use case and explaining that to you. Today, if I had to send, let us say, to Samir here, 100 rupees, I would do it on UPI. But before UPI, I would have used Paytm wallet. I would have gone to my Paytm wallet, debited it by 100 rupees, credited his wallet by 100 rupees. Paytm would have informed him, and boom, the transaction is done. In that case, both Samir and I were interacting only with one party. That party is called Paytm. It's a single party system. Today, if I have to do this, I'll probably go to PhonePe. PhonePe needs a sponsor bank. It must have a sponsor bank. Till March 5th last year, it used to be Yes Bank. Yes Bank failed. It is now ICICI Bank. Then it has to talk to my debiting bank account, which is, let's say, SBI. Let us say his bank account is HDFC Bank, and then NPCI. So there are 5 parties involved. Now, in 2016, February 11, 2016, when iSpirit and NPCI launched it for developers, there was no belief that a 5-party system could outperform a single-party system on experience, on security, because there are 5 things you can hack, or on reliability. Today, 5 years later, that debate is not there in the ecosystem at all. Why? Because these 5 parties are actually, they interact with each other with a protocol, very clearly defined protocol that is there. So that protocol, since it's well designed, allows a 5-party system to outperform a single party. This is still a difficult thing to do. In fact, many of you have an iPhone from a company called Apple, whose proposition is that a single party system will outperform a 5-party system. That's how it has almost $2 trillion of market cap. So this is a contentious idea. But India has done that. Therefore, UPI as a protocol handles more transactions than any other payment system in the world today, as a multi-party system. And so therefore, internet is nothing but a multi-party protocol. Email is a SMTP protocol in 1982. HTTP is a protocol. SIP, the protocol we are using to talk, is called Session Initiation Protocol, is a protocol. So India earlier was a recipient of the Western protocols. Now it is a creator of protocols. UPI is a success story. DEPA is a success story. Open Credit Enabled Network is a success story. In health, we don't know whether it will be successful or not. It is coming. It's called Unified Health Interface, another multi-party protocol. We are building multi-party protocols for our own use at a scale no other country in the world is building it. These are open and these are public. So first, we must understand that this is happening. In a multi-party protocol, there are 2 things that become important. When you had payment, one party, 30 basis points, it went to one party, very simple business model. When it has to be shared by 5 people, you have to think about incentives much more carefully. Business model is much more complex. Second is regulation is much more complex. So we have this hidden strength in India to now regulate multi-party systems because we ourselves have built our multi-party protocols. That is what I'm calling as smart regulation. And I am reasonably confident that it will happen. And I am hoping that Ravinder's wish that we don't do a copy paste of some other country's regulation, whether it's Singapore or China or any other country, is not going to happen. We'll use our own skills to be able to do regulation. So I want to point out that crypto is a multi-party protocol, first of all, right? And it uses ledger technology. Ravinder is absolutely right. The current ledger technology, whether it's blockchain or Ethereum 2.0, don't meet India's scale. And so India is building its own private public ledger technology. You can go to iSpirit's GitHub and you can see it being built in real time in front of everybody. Because the India scale that you need for the India ledger technology is not offered by Ethereum. In fact, if you actually have to regulate it, then you, as everybody said, you need to do KYC. You have real IDs in Ethereum, but one of those IDs or more of those IDs have to be called attested IDs. The only system in the world for attested IDs that works at scale is our Indian Aadhaar system. So therefore, for 2 years, we've been partnering with Ethereum to figure out a way where they could find this and use this as a self-sovereign identity system in their system as they go forward. So the point I'm saying is, I'm going to end with this. You know, a few weeks ago, we celebrated 106th anniversary of Bangalore being the first city in Asia to get electrification. And Vishweshwarya is therefore a very respected person in the country for that reason. 106th. And I can go and ask this panel and say, how does electricity move energy from the power station into your house? Does it move it through the flow of electrons? And I will tell you 95% of the people will say, yes, it's because of the flow of electrons. And the reality is that that is not the correct answer. So 105 years later, we still don't fully understand in the public space as to how energy flux is different from electron movement, right? And so we have to realize that this is going to be a set of people who hopefully understand what they're talking about. They have to be co-opted into this process. And if we do that, we will get the right answers. If we don't do that, we will end up being a copy-paste kind of a system which will not work in India, because the copy-paste systems, as one of you said, don't work in India. India needs its own templates, cannot import Western templates and make them work here. So this is really the call and the need of the hour. We have to look at all this from an India first perspective and then take it forward, whether it's regulation or it is leapfrogging trust in our economy as we go forward.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And in fact, it's such an interesting subject. We need to organize, as Professor Dey also suggested, that another session to brainstorm it and come up with more dimensions and answers to it. Well, gentlemen, we have as much time and we have used it extremely judiciously. And thank you very much for your contribution and sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you.